The private jet stood ready on the runway, polished and shining under the afternoon sun. Inside, everything smelled of leather and perfume, the air calm and expensive. Billionaire Richard Langston sat stiffly in his seat, checking his watch. He had meetings waiting in Los Angeles, and everything had to run smoothly. His wife Clara sat beside him, nervous and quiet. Their 10-year-old son Ethan sat near the window, holding a small model airplane. The boy's eyes moved quickly, his hands shaking slightly. Ethan had autism. Loud sounds, bright lights, or sudden changes could overwhelm him. Flying was always difficult for him, but today felt different. He looked frightened even before the jet began to move. Monica Hayes, the flight attendant, checked the cabin for the last time before takeoff. She had been working in the airline industry for 12 years. She had seen crying babies, rude passengers, and emergencies, but nothing made her lose her calm. Her soft voice and warm smile made people feel safe. As she passed by, she noticed the small boy clutching his airplane tightly, his breathing already fast. She offered him a gentle smile, but he didn't respond. Clara gave her a polite nod, whispering, "He gets anxious during takeoff." Monica simply said, "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll keep an eye on him." When the engine started roaring, Ethan covered his ears and began to shake. The sound was too loud, too sudden. His breathing turned into sobs, then screams. He threw his toy and began kicking the seat. Clara tried to calm him, but her own hands were trembling. Richard frowned, embarrassed and angry. "Ethan, stop this now," he shouted, but it only made the boy scream louder. The other attendants looked unsure what to do. One whispered to Monica, "Should we tell the pilot?" Monica shook her head. "Let me try first," she said softly. She slowly knelt beside Ethan's seat. Her eyes were kind, her tone steady. "Hey there," she said quietly. "I'm Monica. Can I sit here with you for a bit?" Ethan didn't answer, but his crying slowed for a few seconds. Monica noticed his small fists pressed against his ears. She gently took a soft napkin and placed it over his hands, muting the noise slightly. "It's okay," she whispered. "The loud sound means we're flying. You're safe." He looked at her for the first time, tears on his cheeks. "It's too loud," he said shakily. Monica nodded. "I know. It used to scare my little brother too, but I found something that helped him." She began humming softly, a slow tune that filled the cabin like a warm blanket. It was an old song her grandmother used to sing to calm frightened children. The melody was gentle, almost like the rhythm of breathing. The passengers who had been staring grew quiet. The hum of the engines mixed with Monica's voice until Ethan's cries softened. She noticed his small broken toy plane on the floor. "Oh no," she said with a kind smile. "Your plane needs fixing." She picked it up carefully. "Let's fix it together, okay?" She took a piece of tape from the service card, patched the broken wing, and handed it back to him. Ethan looked at the toy, then at her. For the first time that flight, he smiled a little. Richard and Clara exchanged surprised glances. They had seen therapists and specialists, but none could stop Ethan's panic that fast. Monica continued sitting beside him, asking gentle questions about his toy. "What's your plane's name?" she asked. "Silver Falcon," Ethan whispered proudly. "That's a brave name," she said. "Maybe it's brave like you." The boy's eyes softened. After a while, she invited him to help her pass out snacks. He stood beside her in the aisle, handing out small packets with careful focus. The other passengers smiled kindly now, their earlier judgment gone. Every time Ethan felt nervous, Monica gave him another small task: counting cups, straightening napkins, folding a towel. Her calm energy filled the cabin. An hour passed like this. Clara finally relaxed, tears of relief in her eyes. She whispered to her husband, "He's calm, Richard. Look at him." Richard nodded slowly, watching his son hand out drinks with the flight attendant. He looked smaller than usual, but peaceful. Something inside Richard shifted. For years, he had tried to control every part of his son's life: appointments, schedules, rules. But Monica had done something different. She didn't control him. She understood him. After finishing the snack round, Monica brought Ethan back to his seat. "You did a great job, Captain Silver Falcon," she said cheerfully. Ethan giggled softly, a sound so rare that Clara's heart squeezed. He looked out the window and whispered, "We're flying, Mom." Clara smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. And you're brave." When Monica returned to her duties, she kept glancing back to make sure Ethan was okay. Each time, he waved at her shyly. She waved back. Hours passed peacefully. Richard leaned back, thinking about what had just happened. The woman had stayed patient and gentle, never once raising her voice. She didn't see a spoiled child or a problem. She saw his son. As the jet prepared to land, Monica walked back to check on everyone. "We'll be landing soon," she said kindly. "Did you enjoy your flight, Ethan?" The boy nodded. "You helped me," he said. "You fixed my plane." Monica smiled and said, "You fixed it too." We made a good team. When the wheels touched the ground, Ethan clapped his hands with excitement. "We landed," he said, laughing. The entire cabin felt lighter. Richard and Clara gathered their things, but Richard kept glancing at Monica. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, gratitude mixed with humility. As passengers began leaving, he stopped her. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly, "you have no idea what you just did for my family." She smiled kindly. "It's all right, sir. He's a good kid. He just needed a calm moment." Richard looked down, unsure how to respond. "You've done something that no one else has managed in years." Clara joined him, her eyes wet. "Thank you. You saw him when no one else could." Monica simply nodded, her voice soft. "Sometimes all we need is a little patience. He's stronger than he thinks." She turned to Ethan. "You were amazing today, Captain Silver Falcon." Ethan grinned and hugged his small plane. "You're my friend," he said. Monica's eyes softened. "I like that very much." As they walked off the jet, the golden sunset spilled through the windows, painting everything in a warm glow. Richard held his wife's hand, looking back once more at the woman who had changed their flight, and perhaps their lives. He thought about all the money he had spent trying to help his son, all the professionals and experts he had hired. Yet, the peace his son found came not from a doctor or a program, but from a stranger's gentle heart. In a car waiting outside, Ethan kept talking about Monica. "She fixed my plane," he said. "She sang a song. She said I was brave." Clara smiled through tears, stroking his hair. Richard stared out the window, lost in thought. For the first time, he felt he had learned something not from wealth or success, but from kindness. The flight that had started in chaos had ended in quiet wonder. Monica returned to her small apartment that night, tired but smiling. She didn't know her act of kindness would soon be shared online by a passenger who had taken a photo of her kneeling beside Ethan. But even without knowing it, she carried peace in her heart. She had simply done what came naturally, to care. And somewhere across the city, a billionaire sat with his family, realizing that not all heroes wear uniforms of power or wealth. Some wear flight attendant badges and carry hearts big enough to calm storms that money never could. When the jet touched down in Los Angeles, everyone began to gather their things, but Richard stayed still in his seat. His mind was full. He had seen something on that flight he could not stop thinking about. His son, who'd screamed and cried for years during every takeoff, had smiled because of one woman's kindness. That moment replayed in his mind over and over. Clara touched his shoulder gently. "Let's go," she whispered. But he turned and looked toward Monica, who was standing by the cabin door, thanking passengers as they left. Her smile was calm, her eyes kind, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. When their turn came to leave, Richard stopped beside her. His voice was quieter than usual. "Miss Hayes, you changed my son's day and mine, too." Monica smiled politely. "He did all the hard work," she said. "He just needed someone to help him feel safe." Richard wanted to say more, but couldn't find the right words. Ethan suddenly tugged his sleeve and said, "Bye, Miss Monica. Thank you for fixing Silver Falcon." She crouched down, smiled, and held out her hand. "You're very welcome, Captain," she said softly. "Keep flying brave." Ethan hugged his small toy airplane tightly and waved as they left the cabin. That night, at home, Ethan couldn't stop talking. For the first time, he described his flight with excitement. "She sang to me, Mom. She fixed my plane. And she wasn't scared of me." Clara listened with tears in her eyes. Richard sat in silence, his throat tight. He had never heard his son speak so warmly about anyone outside the family. When Ethan finished, he carefully placed his toy airplane on his bedside table and whispered, "Good night, Miss Monica." Clara smiled sadly. She really touched him. For the next few days, Richard couldn't focus on his meetings. Every time he opened his laptop, the image of Monica kneeling beside his son filled his thoughts. He asked his assistant to find out what airline she worked for and if she could be contacted. The assistant looked surprised but did as told. A few days later, she came back with her information. Monica lived in a small apartment near the airport, still working long hours. Richard decided to meet her. He arranged for a lunch meeting and asked if she'd be willing to join. Monica was hesitant at first. "Sir, I'm just a flight attendant. I didn't do anything special," but Richard insisted kindly. "Please. It would mean a lot to me and my family." When Monica arrived at the quiet restaurant, she felt nervous. She wore a simple blue dress and carried her usual calm smile. Richard and Clara were already waiting. He stood up as soon as he saw her. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming." She nodded politely. "You can call me Monica." Clara smiled warmly. "You gave our son peace. That's not something money can buy." Over lunch, Richard asked how she had known how to calm Ethan. Monica looked down for a moment, her voice soft. "I had a younger brother, Devin. He had autism too. He was gentle and smart, but the world wasn't kind to him. I learned that loud voices and harsh reactions never help. What he needed was patience, a soft tone, and someone to listen." Her eyes grew misty. "He passed away when he was 10. Since then, I try to help kids like him whenever I can." Clara reached out and touched her hand. "That explains everything. You understood Ethan in a way no one else could." Richard listened quietly, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I've spent years trying to fix things with money," he said slowly. "Therapists, private schools, doctors. But you helped him with kindness. That's something I can't buy." Monica shook her head gently. "Kindness isn't expensive. It just takes time and care. Your son just needed someone who didn't see him as a problem." After that lunch, Richard couldn't stop thinking about what she said. He called his corporate team the next day and announced something new, a foundation called Wings of Calm. It would train airline staff to support children with autism and other special needs during travel. It started with one flight, he told them, and one person who made a difference. When the news reached Monica, she was overwhelmed. She didn't expect her simple act of care to inspire something so large. Richard called her again and asked if she would help lead the first training sessions. "You understand this better than anyone," he said. Monica agreed, touched beyond words. A few weeks later, during one of her flights, Monica noticed passengers whispering excitedly. A story had started spreading online. A woman had posted a picture of her kneeling beside Ethan mid-flight with the caption, "This flight attendant didn't just calm a child. She reminded us what humanity looks like." The post had gone viral. People from around the world shared it with messages of love and gratitude. Many parents with children like Ethan wrote comments saying they cried reading it. Monica was surprised when she saw the article appear on news sites the next day. "Billionaire's son calmed by kind flight attendant," read one headline. Reporters tried to find her, but she quietly stayed at work, avoiding attention. For her, it had never been about fame. A month later, Richard invited Monica and her family to visit Ethan's school. She almost said no, afraid of the attention, but then she received a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a drawing, a simple picture of a plane flying through clouds with two figures waving. Underneath it were the words, "Thank you, Miss Monica, from Captain Silver Falcon." That made her smile. When she arrived at the school, Ethan spotted her instantly and ran across the playground with his arms open. "Miss Monica!" he shouted with joy. He hugged her tightly, his face pressed against her uniform. Tears filled her eyes. "You came," he said, smiling. "I told everyone you're my friend." She knelt and said softly, "Of course I came." Friends keep their promises. Richard stood nearby, watching quietly. His eyes filled with emotion as he saw the woman who had once knelt beside his son now being hugged like family. "You gave me my boy back," he said to her later. "You reminded me what matters most." From that day forward, Monica began helping Richard's new foundation. Together, they trained dozens of flight attendants, teaching them how to stay calm, speak gently, and comfort children with special needs. She spoke to new trainees with warmth, saying, "Sometimes a small act of care can change an entire journey." Every time she said those words, she remembered Ethan's smile. The foundation grew fast. Airlines across the country began to adopt its methods. Parents sent thank-you letters, telling how their children now traveled peacefully because of attendants trained through wings of calm. And every time Richard saw one of those letters, he thought about that single flight and that single song that had started it all. One evening, after a training session, Monica opened her bag and saw Ethan's drawing folded neatly inside. She always carried it with her on flights. It was her reminder that compassion could travel farther than any airplane. She smiled, touched the paper gently, and whispered, "Keep flying brave, Captain Silver Falcon." At the Langston home, Ethan's room had changed too. On his wall, beside his favorite posters, hung a framed photo of a smiling flight attendant and a little boy holding a toy plane. Below it, Richard had engraved a line that read, "True heroes bring calm where there is fear." Richard often looked at that frame before leaving for work. It reminded him that success wasn't about how much he owned, but about how much peace he could bring to others. He had learned this lesson not from a boardroom, but from a gentle woman with a kind heart and a song that calmed the sky. And somewhere high above the clouds, whenever Monica worked a flight, children smiled a little easier, and parents breathed a little lighter because one woman had shown that a heart full of kindness could be stronger than the loudest storm.